Hello, everybody, and welcome to Good Stuff. My name is Kevin Bille, and I am glad you're going to be spending some time with us today. I've got an old acquaintance, if you will, and somebody I've been blessed to stay in touch with over the years, more so as of recently, Kyle Getter, University of Virginia, Director of Recruiting and Player Development. Good morning, Kyle. Great to have you on.
Hey, good morning, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's as we were just talking, a unique time, of course, and I don't know many people. I'm sure some people remember you from your days from being in Ohio, but it's been some time. How about you just walk us back a little bit with your path, maybe starting with Hanover and how you've gotten into this business and everybody you've worked for and places you've been.
Sure. So I grew up in Dayton, Ohio. Went and played at Center College in Kentucky for 2 years. And then made a unique choice. I was a 2-year starter at center and made a unique choice. I knew I wanted to be a basketball coach and chose to transfer to Hanover. The head coach there was a guy named Mike Beitzel, who is actually a Northeast Ohio guy, Philly. And, he was known for getting guys into coaching at all levels, and really went there and, learned from him as a student coach for 2 years. And then he kept me on as an assistant coach for a year. From there, I went to the University of Dayton and worked for Oliver Purnell as a graduate assistant. We had a really good year, finished 16th in the country. He gets the Clemson job, and, I'm working in my hometown, which is a dream come true. And actually was blessed enough to stay at Wright State, stay right there in Dayton, worked for Paul Biancardi for 2 years, and then made the move to Marshall. Went to the Marshall, worked for a guy named Ron Jersa, who I had worked with at the University of Dayton, and developed a close relationship with him and worked for him at Marshall. And then we got let go at Marshall, and I believe that's where maybe you and I first crossed paths. I took a job at Walsh, your alma mater, and you were the head coach at Notre Dame College. And, worked for Jeff Young there, and that was really good for me. I was newly married, expecting our first, our son at the time, and was there for a year, and we had an unbelievable year.
Don't talk about the games against us, all right, please.
Hey, man, you guys are pretty good. It was always a little amped up with you being Walsh alum. So, but yeah, then from there, I went and worked at Liberty University for a guy named Ritchie McKay. And, wild story of how, I even got hired there. I'm at a softball game, a Walsh softball game with Jeff Young, our head coach. It's like May, beginning of May. And I'm content at Walsh. We just had our son. He's like, 6 months old, and Jeff and I were just hanging out. It's like a Thursday afternoon. I get a call from a friend of mine, and he says, "Hey, Ritchie McKay is going to call you. Do you know Ritchie McKay?" And I knew of Ritchie McKay, but I didn't know him personally. And I said, "Okay." He said, "Yeah, he's an opening at Liberty. He's been the head coach there for a year." And at the time, Ritchie had been a head coach at New Mexico and Oregon State, Colorado State, and kind of really climbed up the ladder quick. And said, "Okay." And so Ritchie calls me. I end up meeting with him. He hires me. I think I might have been the first guy he ever hired that he didn't know. And a lot of that was based on the recommendation from a very good friend of mine. And, so from there I go to Liberty and work for Ritchie as an assistant coach. And we have an unbelievable year. We have Seth Curry as a freshman. He leads all freshmen in scoring in the country. We set a school record for wins, and Tony Bennett gets the job at the University of Virginia. So Ritchie and Tony were super close. Dick Bennett was Ritchie's mentor. So Ritchie decides to leave and become an assistant. He becomes the associate head coach at Virginia. So now I'm thinking, man, I went from Marshall to Walsh to Liberty, and had 3 years, 3 moves in 3 years. What's God got for me next? Well, Shaka Smart gets the job at VCU. Again, I had played against Shaka in college when I was at center, and he was at Kenyon. And then we worked together at the University of Dayton. We shared an office. He was the director of basketball operations, and I was a GA. So when you share a small office together with someone, you get to know them very well.
Pretty well, huh?
Yeah. So, he offered me an opportunity to come there. We had tremendous amount of success, went to the Final Four in 2011. Then I go to Radford with Mike Jones, who was on our staff at VCU. He gets the head coaching job at Radford. I go there, help him, rebuild that program. And then, it's funny how things work. Coach McKay gets the job again at Liberty. He comes back, which is very uncommon for someone to come back to a place where they left. And I go back with him for 3 years. And then, in 2018, I get hired at UVA, and I've been here since.
Wow. I mean, it's obviously a long path and been in a lot of places, but I just find it interesting, everywhere you've been. Well, I guess in talking now, the one thing that pops up is just the relationships that you've made over time and can continue to stay true to those. But, I just love your path, Colin. You look at the leaders that you've been alongside, and the success, at Hanover, the success to Dayton, to Walsh, to VCU. I mean, you're talking like some of the best seasons ever. To Radford, I think you had 44 wins in 2 years there, which was the highest win total. And then, of course, Liberty, there was even 23 wins. And, we haven't even talked about Virginia and winning the national championship, the first year there. So, give us an inside look, if you will, to some of these guys that you work for. What makes them unique, I guess, first off, and then how has that impacted you? And not only maybe as a coach, maybe how's that impacted you too as a husband, as a father, as a person in general? So kind of a loaded two-part question there, but
sure. Yeah, that's a great question. And sorry if I was a little long-winded.
No, that's good.
I've had a lot of moves, and I think each of them are significant. To answer your question, I got some advice a long time ago, and it was, it's not about where you are, but who you're with. Mm-hmm. And, I think as a young coach, for me, I was just trying to do anything really to find a way to get in the business. And, it's hard. I mean, there's only so many coaching jobs, and it's super competitive. And a lot of times, it's not necessarily like, who but like who really knows you. So, I started working camps and trying to develop relationships. And I think, for one, working for Coach Beitzel at Hanover, I think, people knew that he was a no-nonsense guy, and he wasn't going to recommend someone that maybe wasn't prepared or he felt, strongly about. And I think, from that, I mean, he really held me in high account in terms of paying attention to details, being authentic with relationships. And, I tried to carry that on each place that I was. And, I really looked for, to try to be with people that, one, had, extremely high character, were going to operate with integrity, and then, guys that were going to challenge me and stretch me as a coach. I think I wanted to continue to grow. I just wasn't going to be content with, maybe where I was and, relax. I wanted them to, my goal still is to be a head coach. And I think we always have to have that, ever growing mindset.
Right. Yeah, for sure. That's really good. I agree. And you said probably one of my favorites. I heard this one time down at Florida Clinic. I think it was Bille and Larry Shyatt were giving it. It's not who it's who knows you. That is so crucial, and I think sometimes people, forget that. What would you attribute, being with all these different type leaders, what would you attribute to the success that they've had? Do you see that as one thing? Is it different with each of them? What is it that sticks out to you, to these guys and these programs and to you in your life? What would you attribute that, success to?
I think each of them are kind of unique. I heard, I think it was, a guy one time say, our job as coaches is very, very similar to that of a pilot. There's going to be a lot of turbulence, and you just have to land the plane safely.
That's good.
So, I think, each and every guy that I worked for, is unique. They've each handled, adversity and things that come up different ways. But I think that character piece is kind of, the most common, piece that each coach had. I knew that, I never was going to work for somebody that was going to ask me to do something that, maybe they weren't going to do themselves, or hadn't done themselves. So, that was big for me. And I just think, again, just, really, just being able to continue to grow and to just, like if you look at each coach as a tree, just kind of, picking a piece of fruit off that branch and taking a bite of it and just, being able to grow from each person. I think, that's really what I try to do.
Yeah, luckily for you, you've had a lot of different kinds of fruits to taste out there. I'm sure that's more for you. And let's talk about your role a little bit and what you're doing now, Kyle. I mean, it's director of recruiting and player development. I think there's got to be some things in the recruiting world and how you guys are approaching things down there, knowing you, your character, and who you're working for, that people can take away from this. We've got, once again, coaches and business leaders and parents and spouses that are listening. What are you doing with that overall recruiting approach, that somebody can take away and apply that in one of those areas of their lives?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I think for us, at UVA, we're unique probably in that, everything that we do really revolves around 5 pillars that are, our program is built on, from recruiting to, our practice to, really to everything. And we recruit to the pillars. So I think, for us, we're asking ourselves, okay, a coach is having very candid conversations with these, recruits during the recruiting process about the pillars, because he doesn't want them to have any surprises, right? When they, if they just should decide to come here. And I think for us, that's a kind of a litmus test, if you will, of, as we're peeling layers and building relationships of, do these guys really fit our program? Do they fit the pillars? Well, and coach uses the line all the time, I want a staff and players that he can lose with first.
I love it.
Because there's going to be adversity. Right? I mean, there just is. I mean, there's very few teams that have gone undefeated over the course of the year and not had a bad practice or, not had a bad day. So, that's a really critical piece. And I think, as, each pillar in itself kind of, has its own way of holding guys in account. And that's a main focus of ours.
That's great. And I want to leave people hanging a little bit on those pillars, and we'll come back to them. Excuse me. But, you said something that really resonated with me. I remember taking the job at Notre Dame. I think I was the only guy dumb enough to do it at the time. They were 9-49 and 0-30 in the league. And when we first started, I was miserable because we were losing. And with all due respect at the time, just losing with maybe bad guys that just weren't buying in, weren't going to class, and so on and so forth. So I think that's so crucial that you have good people with you along the ride. I know, Kyle, for you and I personally, faith plays a big part in our lives. It's the foundation. So where does that fit for you in the grand scheme of things and some of the people you've worked with?
Oh, no, that's a faith to me is, that's the most important thing in my life. Just, kind of knowing, what God's word says about me. I think and so often in, the world in general, let alone college basketball, whether it's social media or websites or newspaper, regardless, you're always reading about somebody else's opinion of you. And I think, or your program. And I think, for me, just, just knowing what God's word says about me, knowing that, I'm a child of God and just, I'm going to, seek him first and not use, my job or, this game as an idol. Just for me, that's the most important thing. And I try to live that out the best I can. I think we all have, get distracted at times and get caught up on our own stuff, but that's really my main focus.
Yeah, well, you can tell. And I think that's awesome and do a heck of a job with it. And so you had mentioned adversity there a little bit. of course, you were not with Virginia, if I'm not mistaken, when they lost as the 1 seed, correct? You were not. You
Correct.
came the next year. So for the people that are listening that don't know, I think there was 135 times, if I'm not mistaken, that the number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament beat the number 16 seed until Virginia lost to Maryland. Is it Maryland, Baltimore County, right? UMBC?
Yeah, UMBC.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll never forget watching the game, never forget it happening. And then so next year, insert, you to this program. And then Virginia goes from, losing that game and making history to coming back and winning the national title. I mean, one of the greatest storylines of all time. And so I'd be interested to hear, just your thoughts in general on coming into that and with the adversity. And I have to share that quote that we talked about from Tony Bennett, your head coach, when this was all over and you guys won it all. He said, if you learn to use it right, the adversity, it'll buy you a ticket to a place you couldn't have gone any other way. Pretty impressive.
Yeah, I mean, Coach Bennett is as good as it gets. And I think a lot of times just the way, and this is before I got to Virginia, just the way that he handled that whole thing was incredible. I think, you mentioned that quote, and that quote actually comes from a TED Talk, called The Storyteller, and that's by Donald Davis. And it's a story about a guy who, he's wondering how his father became the way he did. And, that ticket, it's interesting. We had our banquet, Kevin, our national championship banner, where we dropped the banner this past fall, and no one knew Coach was going to do this, but, he talked about the ticket, right? If you learn to use it the right way, it'll take you someplace that, you never could imagine, to go. And he pulled out a game ticket to the UMBC game. Yeah. And then he held out a ticket to the national championship game. And he said, really, like, you can't have one without the other. I think that just, I think our team, and I wasn't there to experience that, but I was, it was talked about, the UMBC loss it was open. I mean, it was open dialogue. And, I think, what did you learn from it? And even from a staff, what needed to be addressed moving forward? And I think it really burned, a fire in all of our bellies, that just to come out and have something to prove the next year. And, I think there's a important part of that is like, like if you have negative thoughts, I think I read somewhere where there's, the human, has 2,000 to 3,000 thoughts a day, right? So, really you sculpt your future with your thoughts. So I think it's easy to have, like, if our players or coach or our staff would have had negative thoughts, and felt sorry for themselves or whatever, after that loss, who knows what would happen. But I think, right, the positive thoughts, hey, we're strong enough to get through this. And, last year, I mean, it was just meant to be, in the NCAA tournament with, the way we won, starting really with the whole, every tournament game with Gardner Webb all the way through to Texas Tech. I mean, we were down in every single one of those games and came back. So I think, maybe God's hand was
right, for
on
sure.
those games.
Well, I think it's a valuable lesson. There's a lot of people in life, and just once again, a great storyline. Let's circle back to those pillars, if you will. I mean, obviously, we don't want you to give us every little, give us all the secret sauce here, but let's talk to these pillars and just elaborate a little bit more, because I think some people might see a word. I think a lot of people might see a word and they might assume what it is, but it's one thing to have it on a wall or to have it in a locker room and then to really impart it into your program. Mm-hmm. So kind of, just focusing on each word and knowing how, that is applicable once again in your program and how people can take it away. And the first one I absolutely love, which this one rings true when I think of you, Kyle. It's humility and just knowing who we are. Give us a little bit, when it comes to that part of the program, that pillar.
Yeah. So I think, first, humility, it's knowing who you are. And I think, it really focuses on keeping, everyone, doing the little things, like no one has arrived. And, you hear the slogan, like, humble and hungry, right? Or hungry and humble, like, I think, I think sometimes there's a sense of sometimes guys have false humility, and that's or maybe they deflect and they really, but that's not, I think, if you think you're good, it's okay to think you're good. That's knowing who you are. But I think we all need to also realize that, somebody maybe in another school in our league or town next door or whatever, is just as good or better. Right. And I think that needs to, keep driving guys to, to strive to be their best. And I think, Kyle Guy said this one time, one of our players at UVA, he said, to him, humility was, not thinking less of yourself, but, thinking of yourself less. And I think that's a really good way to put it.
Yeah, great quote there. Is it safe to say, before we go to the next one, is humility out of the five, is that the hardest one nowadays with kids that you see? As you're leafing through all these different prospects, is that the one that you see is least represented by individuals nowadays or not?
I think they probably all have, similar weights in different ways,
Right.
but I do think that, probably in recruiting,
Yeah.
that's the one that maybe sticks out the most.
Yeah, that's what I was curious to know. Yeah, I would think so, just in general. Next one is passion. Absolutely love this one as well. Do not be lukewarm. Talk to us a little bit about passion and what you're looking for there.
Yeah. So first of all, let me go back. All these pillars are biblically founded,
Right.
and they come from Coach Dick Bennett, who was the head coach at Wisconsin Green Bay, and coached Tony there, and then was at Wisconsin and Washington State, and so we've carried that on, and passion. Don't be lukewarm. We want that engine red hot, and whether it's, you've heard people see like bring the energy, right, or bring the juice, but I also think it can go a step further, as do you have a love for the game, right? Like, are you just doing it because you're expected to do it, or maybe your mom and dad think that you know you're 6'7" and you should be playing
Yeah.
basketball? Or are you doing it because you love the game and you want to get better? And I think that speaks a little bit, or really a lot, to how much guys work individually on their game. Are you passionate? Are you superficially committed, or are you all the way committed?
Yeah, that's really good. I can just think about when I coached and all the players that I coached. I think that's probably one thing that sticks out is I remember one time we had a guy that could have gone to college, but one of the coaches asked me, does he like basketball? Does he love basketball? And it's so true. There's such a difference. Unity is the third pillar. And I know in there it says, do not divide our house. This might be one that people assume, you have to have this a team, with your team, you have to have this at work, but how does this come about for you guys, and how are you creating that?
Yeah. So, we do a lot of team activities where, I think the relationships are way beyond just the surface level of being together at practice. And coach really promotes that. Now, we understand that, not everybody's going to be best friends with their teammates, but I think there has to be that bond and that, unified spirit, that, you're going to be, if you're a part of UVA basketball, you're going to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself. And, that kind of fits hand in hand with humility. There's an African proverb that coach, references all the time. And it's, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And we talk about that all the time, and I think that could be, as a coach, you could probably, nitpick that a lot, if you're watching practice tape or game tape and seeing guys maybe trying to do their own thing, or, missing a defensive assignment where they were supposed to help, just, all kinds of things. But I think that, that unified spirit, and I go back to our national championship. Our guys were they were like super, super tight and close knit. And again, they weren't, not all of them were, best friends and hanging out, off the court. But man, when they stepped, in between those lines, man, they were like, super close.
Right, which obviously that trust level was just to another level, I'm assuming. And yeah, that African proverb is good stuff. Two more here. The fourth one, servanthood, and just making your teammates better. But I really think, I think servanthood, Kyle, is probably something, if I look back at my own personal career, because I think during some of these talks, we want to be reflective. I think it was maybe in here somewhere, but it wasn't at the forefront. I know now in my life when it's less about me and more about we, as I would say, and just serving other people, that's a game changer, isn't it?
Oh, no doubt. And I think what you're doing with, your speaking and, like things like this, like the good stuff. I mean, you're opening up opportunities to serve. And I think, I think that's tremendous what you're doing. But yeah, I think, like for me, people probably have thought, at times I'd even, look back and my career and I'm like, man, like, like I'm just trying to serve. I'm trying to serve. I'm trying to serve. And then, I think at times people are like, well, what about yourself?
Yeah, right.
But I think, like, you go back to, being a foot washer, right? Just, I just think, being able to serve and, put others, not necessarily all the time, needs ahead of your needs. I mean, you have to serve your needs too, but I think, just being willing to make other people's, life easier. And, for me as a coach, that's one of my goals every day is how can I make, our coaching staff, the rest of the staff, how can I make their lives easier? How can I make our players better? So, yeah, servanthood. I mean, that you could go on and on about that, but I certainly think you're embodying that with what you're doing.
Well, I appreciate that, but I think it is such a shift that if you could make that as a person, like you said, you want to, not to make a plug here at home, but my wife to me is unbelievable, always putting others first to the point where it's like, man, hey, you got to take care of yourself a little bit more. Because if you don't take care of yourself, whether that's physically, mentally, whatever, then it's hard to serve others. But I think the mindset when you could make that shift as a leader, it just really transcends your team. And then lastly is thankfulness. And just, I love it says learn from each circumstance. We obviously just talked about the situation down there. Is this also, am I under the assumption that this is where gratitude comes into play as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, going back to that UMBC reference, I think, I don't think anybody would have, at the time said, oh man, I wish we, got beat by a 16 seed. But I think, being able to learn from that and, probably helped us, be able to win a national championship just because, like I mentioned, being down or behind in all those NCAA tournament games, our guys never wavered. What's the worst that could have happened, right? I mean,
it already happened.
It already happened. Yeah, exactly. So it's like, okay, like no problem. Like, we've got this. And I think, just being thankful for the ability to play, like you look at the coronavirus right now. I mean, we were at the ACC tournament, Kevin, and at a shoot around and preparing to play Notre Dame. And we finish our shoot around and they say, hey, the ACC tournament's canceled. And, just having that, that gratitude, if you will, right, of, like it's gone, season's over. And just being thankful for the opportunity to play. Yeah, I think that's.
One thing I'd be interested to know if you know this is the year that they lost as the 1 seed, how many seniors were on that team or how many guys, I guess, were not on the team the next year when they won it all?
Yeah, so that would have been three guys.
I feel bad for those 3 guys that they didn't get to, to be a part of that. But hey, just closing up here, I'm going to shoot you some quicker questions, somewhat of a rapid fire. But one thing I'd like to know that I ask some people that I think is beneficial to everybody else is, what are some things that you do to grow? Are you a book reader? Are you a podcast guy? I don't think there's a ton out there, but I'd just be interested to know what you find to be beneficial to your life.
Yeah. So, for me, I'm reading. Right now I'm actually reading, multiple books, and I think, kind of been able to, divide my mind a little bit and be able to compartmentalize each thing, keep them separate and things like that. But I think, just trying to grow and read and learn from others' experience. And, you mentioned a podcast, I'm big into self-care, right? So like, whether it's, try to get a workout in, almost every day, and I'll put the AirPods in and listen to different podcasts or listen to a sermon, as I'm maybe working out or in the car a lot of times. But I think it's really important that, we fill our tank up. And I mentioned about those, sculpting our future with positive thoughts, and I think that's important. So I think, what you're able to put in maybe your own bank account, if you will, I think, you'll be able to, hopefully bear some fruit from that.
Yeah, right, for sure. Well, if you ever have a good one, send it this way. I gotta get better. Hey, kind of somewhat of a rapid fire to finish here. It's okay if the answers go a little longer. We like to call this 3-pointers. I know you shot them well back in the day, so you'll knock this out. Number one, if people could learn one thing from this talk, if you'd want them to hold on to something, what would it be?
Just to continue to surround yourself with great people.
That's good. Number two here, if you could have stepped in my shoes and asked you a question, what question would have that been that I did not ask today?
Well, you didn't ask me how good of a player you were at Walsh University. I know better than that. So, I used to hear about how good you were, but no, I just think, just maybe the difference of levels, like from Division III to NAI to Division I.
Yeah, that would have been a good question. Good one. Last one here. I call this good stuff. Just something I've said over time, I guess, and just more of what I think people need. What is something you feel? What can you give us some good stuff here in closing? Something you might feel is appropriate for this time, or just in general?
I just think one of the most important things would be like, no one is more influential to you, than you. And I think, just being able to positive self-talk and, I think at times we listen to maybe some negative talk, but I think, just continuing to positively self-talk. And then I think, just continuing to grow in your faith. I think that will, lead to a lot of positive talk and, just continue to grow in that way.
Yeah, for sure. Amen to that. Hey, Kyle, where can, if our listeners want to connect with you, social media wise, or just in general with the Virginia program online, where can they do that at?
Yeah, you can go to UVA Athletics, and my contact information is on there, and then also I'm on social media, with Twitter, at Kyle Getter. So yeah, happy to connect with anyone.
Yeah, awesome. Well, hey, Kyle, I really appreciate you spending some time with us today. I'm still dealing with the fact that we were getting ready to head down to Virginia on spring break and stop in and see you. So I'm going to hold you to that. Hopefully, my boys are still asking me when.
Let me know.
We'd love to stop in and see you, the facility, all that it has to offer. But I appreciate you once again being on here today. I love staying in touch with you and just hearing what's going on with your life. I've had a lot of respect for you and not only what you do, but how you go about doing it and the type of person you are. So thanks so much, Kyle.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. I appreciate you, man.
Yeah. Hey, and once again, everybody, there's something in every one of these for you. 1 nugget, 2 nuggets, maybe plenty. And I think Kyle has given us a ton today. So looking forward to hearing how you can take those things and transfer them over into the roles in your life. So until next time, good stuff.